Welcome back to Dallas as we continue Gopher Sports Weekly, another on-location edition of Gopher Sports Weekly here. Radio Row, Sheraton Hotel. They call it the San Antonio Room. We're talking about the Final Four, and we just talked with Norwood Teague and Mike Ellis. Now a guy who really likes those guys, who has nothing but good things to say about them. A longtime friend of the station, assistant coach Ben Johnson. Coach, what do you know? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. No, just down here enjoying the Final Four festivities, and it should be a pretty good weekend full of pack-filled games.
It's pretty interesting. Every time someone comes over here, we just talked to Nolan Richardson a few minutes ago, and yesterday we talked to Bill Frieder, and you've given us a lot of cred. A lot of street cred here for winning the NIT. So thank you for that, first of all. But everybody's talking about, hey, Gophers, Minneapolis won the NIT. What's that like when you win the championship and come to the Final Four a couple of days later?
No, it's definitely exciting. I mean, you want to, as a team, obviously, if you can make the tournament, that's the number one priority. That's a huge deal, no question. But to be in the NIT, that's another respectable tournament. And to get in there and to play 5 games, an additional, almost add a month onto your season, it's huge, and it's another chance to win a championship. I think that's the biggest thing we tried to express to our guys was this is an opportunity to continue to play, continue to get better, to build for the future, to let the seniors go out on a big-time note, and for everybody to win a championship and become a champion. And our guys really bought into that. And there is a small window in athletes' life when you can win a championship, and there's not that many opportunities. And so they really embraced it and had an unbelievable time. It was a great weekend, and just to see our guys excited after the game and see pictures from the game is what it's all about. So it was awesome.
In hindsight, we can see the value of it. I mean, the trophy's back in Minnesota. They play 5 extra games, come together as a team. We can see the value of it. But when you get that announcement on Selection Sunday and you don't make the tournament, you're going to go to the NIT, how do you get past the disappointment that is, because everyone's shooting for that, and get these guys up and going and willing and ready to practice for another couple weeks and then make a deep run into the NIT?
Yeah, no, it can be a little tough, but we have competitive kids. And so I think, like anybody, they were down a little bit, obviously disappointed. We knew we, kind of had destiny in our hands towards the end of the year and had a couple things not go our way. And unfortunately weren't able to make the tournament, but they were able to bounce back. And I think our kids saw the opportunity that they had. They really enjoy being around each other, and they didn't want the season to end. So for them, I think it was kind of easy. Once they realized that, okay, we're not in it, but we get an opportunity to continue to play. They get the opportunity to continue to be around each other and be in practice and playing games and compete. I think it was a pretty easy transition for them.
How rewarding was it for a guy like Austin Hollins to turn in such a great game? Everyone's going to remember the 3. But when you guys were down 6 or 7, he had a couple of steals that turned into transition buckets for you. It was kind of like a perfect Austin Hollins way to finish, doing a little bit of everything.
No, he was unbelievable. Without Austin, obviously, in that game particularly, we wouldn't have the championship. But he had a great end of the season, and for a kid that puts in the work and does everything the right way, that's what you want. And not only him, but Malik hits 2 threes in the final game, and he had kind of been struggling a little bit. Mav, even though he didn't play in the final championship game, we're not in the NITs without Mav. He had played 2 games at home where he had came off the bench and hadn't played in a while, and had major production, double-digit scoring, and just his positive energy on the bench. Otto, who was a senior that hadn't played, comes into the game and makes an injury impact when the team needed him. So it was almost like a perfect storm. We were able to continue to play, and every single senior was able to impact. So now all those guys go out on a positive note, feeling great about themselves, and I think they set the mark for what we want our program to be about.
Your guy Pitino's unbelievable. I mean, he goes 2 days before the tournament, Elliott's out, and he says, Mo's going to have to step up. And, if we really have to, I think Otto could give us a few minutes. Plus 32 minutes.
Unbelievable.
I was talking about that the day after. Because I remember the press conference. He just said, if we're in a pinch. Yeah. Well, I guess, Mo getting 4 fouls and Joey, that getting 4, that constitutes a pinch, apparently, because he played 32 minutes. That was incredible.
No, and to Otto's credit, he came up to us and said, I want to play. I got to play. And I think that's just, it goes back to our guys being such a family, and the true word of it, that he saw, man, this team needs me. Like, I don't want to let this team and my seniors and my other teammates down. And he's just stepped up and, had an unbelievable performance for a guy that obviously hadn't been in the mix to go out there. I don't think people realize, we try to play fast and we try to guard, and you've got to do all these things and get up and down the floor, and the physicality, and not having that in a practice or game situation for weeks, and then just being thrown into the fire. in a crucial moment when not only do you have to play, but you got to produce. Had a big-time rebound, had a putback. I just think that speaks volumes for him, just kind of who he is and the character and what he's about.
Well, Bobby Knight said that he made one of the best passes he's ever seen from the high post in the first half of that game. And then Bobby Knight got on like a million tangents that you probably heard about. But I loved it because it was good stories. But anyway.
You mentioned how the team kind of came together as a family down the stretch. Looking at biological family, Rick Pitino, you guys have been around him through his sons. He's been to a couple games when he can. We saw an interesting exchange towards the end of the game where Rick was in the stands yelling not only at Richard but at the players, telling them what to do, basically coaching from that second row there. How was that dynamic throughout the season? But it culminated in a very important moment, NIT championship, and you got two coaches that are on their different paths but very established, coaching the same sort of situation.
Yeah, I think it's got to be awesome for his dad. I know it is because we've talked about it. Being able to watch his son grow as a young coach on such a big stage, and obviously being in the Garden and the history that their family has with that organization, the history they have with the NIT tournament. It's got to be. It is big time for his dad. And once you're a coach, you're always a coach. So, he's sitting front row, and I'm sure it's hard. Like any parent, now on top of that, you add a Hall of Fame basketball coach as being a parent. He probably didn't realize, half the stuff that he was doing coaching-wise. But, like I said, once you're a coach, you're always a coach. And, he gets excited. He's just like Richard. They have, big-time personalities. They get very enthusiastic, and they get in the moment. But obviously, Coach does a great job with this team. And it's just his team 100%. And the guys have really bought in to everything he's sold and everything that he's been telling them from day one and the process. And I think we saw dividends of that throughout the whole year, just getting to 25 wins and getting a championship that there's no question he's the leader of this team.
Well, what's the pecking order, in terms of Coach Johnson, Coach McHale, Coach Young, in terms of who Richard listens to? And then how does it change when Rick is yelling? Does Rick trump everything? Because it's like he was trying to get his attention a couple of times. And I asked Austin about this yesterday. I had him by phone right after you guys, as you were coming back home, and I said, "Did you look over and wonder which Pitino you were supposed to look at?" Because they were both yelling. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Did you lose a game check? I guess did you have to give a cut to Rick?
No. He probably has enough money where I don't think that's an issue. But no, it's awesome to have him around. And just have him, whether it's at just being there. I think gives everybody a little bit of extra motivation. Just because he's had so much success. I think our guys kind of view him, just like they do with anybody that this is a guy that's been through it. And when he talks to our team, or he delivers a message, and he's always there being positive and encouraging. And I think that just really motivates our guys and knows that we do have such a strong backing, and obviously he's one of the greatest coaches to ever do it.
The controversy from game to game, Florida State to Southern Methodist, to foul or not to foul at the end. Obviously, it seems as if the mentality changed. Lots of discussions on that over the last couple of days. It all worked out. Championship has been won, but the decision changed in the matter of a couple of days. Lots of talk about that.
A little bit. I think situation kind of determines that, and I think, Coach does a great job with having a feel for who's on the floor, what their matchups are. If they have a different type of lineup on the floor where they're going to do certain things or they got a certain end of the game play. But I think time of score, determines some of that, and just having a feel, and right or wrong, I think he made a great call, obviously, to do it. And we try to coach our guys up on both situations, and and then as the game progresses, just trying to figure out what we want to do. But I think our guys did a good job just executing what we talked about, and we were able to get them, obviously Mr. Free Throw, and end up really helping us seal the game.
Well, I can't remember who exactly it was, but a wise coach on Twitter once said, whatever you do in foul or defend, you have to practice it every single time. Whatever it is, you have to practice it. Was that something that you mentioned? You practiced both situations? Was it something you worked on in the interim or that you at least talked about?
Yeah, Coach is really thorough in everything he does in terms of our prep. And those are things we do prep for, and in walkthrough we talk about it, and you put different situations and different time on the clock, and here's the deal. And sometimes it's good to see guys fail in practice, so and you can correct it. So when the game time comes around, they know the do's and don'ts. But I think it's something as a coach you're gonna have to cover, because in the spur of the moment, the heat of the moment, you're dealing with 18 to 20, 21-year-olds. You got to make sure they know, and then you got to go back on kind of the principles that you teach and that the guys are expecting you to call.
Justin mentioned it at the very beginning of our time here. The consensus opinion around here, Bill Frieder, Nolan Richardson, Kenny Smith, the NIT championship is a great thing for the program, for the future of the program. Obviously, you get the guys that are on the team now, a little more experience. Recruits get to see you a little more. Speak on the experience a little bit. These guys that are returning next year, this ability to win a championship, to play deep. Obviously, aspirations are high for what could be an NCAA run in the future with this team now.
Yeah. Most definitely. I think, winning that championship, I think, is such a big piece because, like I said, not many people, programs, players, coaches can say they're a champion. And I think you've got to carry that into a confidence level that goes through the roof, especially when you have a team that's going to be experienced and going to have guys back. They have to take everything that they learned through this run, perseverance, being able to come back from being 7 points down with 5 minutes to go, being able to play with the lead, being able to win on the road, being able to win on a big stage, being able to play and compete in a championship game, and hopefully put that in place for next year. And I think that stuff's invaluable. Like, you can talk about winning, but until you've done it, it's hard to really understand and know what it's all about. And when you're trying to develop a program that has, that winning mentality all the time, well, there's no better way to do it than to fall back on prior history of winning. And I think that's just the biggest piece. And now you develop the culture where that's the expectation. The expectation in this tournament was to go and win the NIT championship, and we're able to do that. Well, the next year's expectation is going to be to win as much as we can, compete for a Big Ten championship, compete for, an NCAA berth, and then see how far we can go. And I think once you've established that and guys understand what it takes to get to that level, then the other steps of the process are a lot easier. But you got to develop that culture and that mentality and the confidence that you can go out there and do it. And now I think these guys are going to approach next year in a whole different light because they've been through it and they understand. And now they know, okay, what these coaches are teaching us, this is the reality. This is the truth. And I think, that's just huge.
Gopher assistant coach Ben Johnson joining us here on Radio Row. The Gophers win the NIT, and Coach Johnson's been celebrating down here in Dallas. It's high fives, kissing babies, shaking hands, being a big man on campus. You've had an interesting last couple years in that you've worked with two coaches that are in their first years at their respective programs, with Miles, who's also running around like an idiot, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you around here, at Nebraska, and then with Coach Pitino here at Minnesota. What were the kind of the differences or even the similarities in Miles taking over Nebraska, you being a part of that, and then Pitino taking over Minnesota and you being a part of that as well?
Yeah, they're both. You take over a program, it's crazy. I mean, it's wild. You're trying to get a feel for, the staff, trying to get a feel for the players. They're trying to get a feel for you. You're trying to get stable in recruiting and figure out, your area and your niche. So the first year for anybody, I mean, it's rough, but both those guys are unbelievable in terms of they know what they want. And both of them are big-time competitors, and they're not going to settle for anything but the best. And they're going to push the staff. They're going to push the players. They're going to push the program to try to get it to the highest level as quick as possible. I think you saw that this year with Nebraska. Coach Miles obviously did an unbelievable job. And in year two, to build that and get that to where it is, is huge. And obviously that's what we're trying to do at Minnesota, to get that program to a point where, it's running at a first-class level and a high rate. And both those guys are different in how they go about it, but you can't argue with the success they've had in the short term, and that hopefully is going to progress into having big time future success.
We've heard Coach Kill on the football side talk about it, even Richard on the basketball side. It takes a couple years to get the right bodies, the right players, so that you can fully execute the system. On the basketball side of that, it can happen quicker or slower, but what's the ideal time when you're looking at year number 3, let's say? Is that when you should be able to kind of fully see the fruits of what Coach brings and what the system will bring?
I think the biggest thing is you just want to consistently see your program taking steps in the right direction. Whether that's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's hard to predict, it's hard to say. But as a staff, we just try to establish a base and try to make steps every year in the right direction. And hopefully that, now we're off to a start where we won an NIT championship. Well, then the next step is bigger and better things, and the next step is bigger and better things. And if you can continue to do that, I think then that's when you're able to make steps in the right direction in your program. But I think it just starts with the simple building blocks, and then every day just trying to be a little bit better, and then being a little bit better the next day, whether that's recruiting, whether that's coaching, whether that's scheduling, whatever it might be. Just try to be a little bit better the next day than you were before. And if you do it the right way and you have a good formula, everybody wants to win, and everybody wants it to be immediate, but you can't cheat the process, and you can't try to take shortcuts, and you can't try to just, get there without doing and implementing and having the right steps.
Part of that process is recruiting, like you talked about. It's probably no secret you were brought in to recruit Minnesota. You're from here. You played here, both high school and college. I know that's why Miles wanted you, because you could recruit the Midwest. Talk about just how devastating it is to not get a recruit that you put in a lot of work with. And then maybe on the flip side, talk about the other side. When you put in 2 years, you put in 3 years, you've done everything. You've found the point person. You've talked to him about Carlson School of Business. You've talked to him about everything, and you get him. I mean, I think you guys are nuts. Recruiting is the one thing I don't understand at all. I could follow coaches on Twitter.
Welcome to it.
I can put in a couple of offenses, as Majerus would say, and a couple of defenses and go, all right, I can get you close, but I can't get you the players. That's my problem. I don't understand how that aspect of it works. What is that part of the job like?
It's obviously the most important part. It's probably the most time-consuming part. It's probably the most frustrating part. It's probably the happiest part. You have the biggest ups and downs when it comes to recruiting, and everybody does. I don't care if you're Division 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be. It's the hardest part because it's an inexact science. There are some situations where you feel like you could be right there with whatever it is, A, B, or C, and for whatever reason it doesn't pan out, and you've got to be able to adjust and move on and go to the next person, the next guy, and it's an inexact science, and you just got to be persistent and persevere, and be able to withstand. There's going to be highs and lows, but you just got to target the right guys that fit what you want to do, that fit your program, that understand what you're all about, and that fit with your philosophy and fit with your head coach. And I think if you see successful programs, they're the ones that are able to find those type and find their niche. And once you've got that, and once you developed your niche and you have a brand, so much now is a brand. And once you've established kind of what your brand is, it's a lot easier to sell to whoever you're selling to. And once you're in there, it's a lot easier to kind of make steps in the right direction recruiting wise.
When you look at the multiple sides of recruiting, obviously you're looking for a player that physically fits. How important is personality, responsibility, the type of kid that this young man is?
No, that's huge. It's huge for a lot of reasons. They've got to mesh with your group of guys. If they don't mesh and there's you can't win your locker room, and you got issues going on in your locker room, well, that trickles down to on the court. At some point, you might be able to get by with it or mask it for a week or 2 weeks or half a year, but at some point it's going to affect, on the court production. Sure. And, if you got guys in there that don't buy in and don't understand philosophy and don't understand what you're about, at some point it's going to affect winning. And I think that's the biggest thing is, you got to target guys and get people that are totally committed. Obviously there's going to be ups and downs with any type of player during the year. But if guys are 2 feet in from day one and you're not coaching that part of it, I think that's a big step in the right direction.
Last thing for you, who's the national champion on Monday night? Who wins tonight? Who wins on Monday?
That's tough. My gut says Florida wins the whole thing. I just, they
don't suck up to Pitino. No. I mean, don't be one of those guys. What do you really think? He's not listening.
No, I really do. I think, there's something to be said about a group of seniors that have been there together through ups and downs, and I think they've persevered so much this year and so much throughout their careers. Whether people didn't believe in them, or believe in their recruiting class early on, to now they're playing at such a high level, momentum. But I think there's a lot to be said with guys that don't want it to end. And we talked about that with our team. But I think with them, you see a group of seniors that really, truly don't want it to end. And I don't think they care who scores. I don't think they care who gets the glory. I don't think they care who has the limelight. I think they all are bought in 100%. And they've got pieces. They can play a variety of ways. They really guard. I think Billy's been there before, as a coach. I think that's important. So I maybe it's with my heart a little bit, but, something just tells me that they've got it going.
Their run is incredible. It's kind of underrated. I mean, I guess I hadn't realized. I mean, 4 straight Elite Eight, even if they had lost in the Elite Eight, that's tough to do in this era.
No question.
And you mentioned seniors not wanting to to let it end.
Yep.
Well, it's also seniors that have had it end one step short, 3 years in a row. It's pretty underrated. I don't think for all the Kentucky and the Wisconsin, I don't think that's getting talked about enough, that they've had a hell of a run.
Yeah, no question, 100%. And I think that's, there's an expectation there with that. When you've won that much, there is an expectation. I think that can help you, especially this time of year, seal the deal. I mean, those guys don't want to let the program down. They want to be – they've heard about for 3 or 4 years all the other great programs. I guarantee you Coach Donovan has talked about the Final Four teams, the national championship teams. Those guys want to be remembered. They want to be 10 years down the line the team that he's talking about to kids in, 2025. And I think there's a lot to be said about that when you get this close – and you're in a program that has rich tradition, you want to leave your footprint. You want to be a team and a person and a player that's able to come back and hold your head high and look up in the stands and see a banner, when you're being honored in 5 years for winning a national championship. You don't want to be left out. And, like I said, there's a lot to be said about that.
Stay out of trouble this weekend. Congratulations on a great first season. Glad you're back coaching at the U, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, man.
Gopher assistant coach Ben Johnson here on Radio Row. We'll come back with much more as we wrap up the Gopher Sports Weekly portion of the show today. We're here until 2:30.